My name's Maya and I'm here today with Nanaimo Foodshare's virtual cooking classes. Today we're going to be making a healthy ice cream sandwich. It has really simple, easy ingredients and it's very, very healthy. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to go over is our equipment. So first of all, you're going to need a high-speed blender or a food processor. I recommend a food processor because it's a lot easier to blend everything in and you don't have to mess around with stirring everything and going again. Next thing you're going to need are a couple of baking sheets. Any size will do. You're going to need some parchment paper. You're going to need a cutting board and a knife, as well as some measuring utensils. So you're going to need half a cup measure, 1 cup measure, quarter cup measure, as well as a teaspoon and a tablespoon. A couple more things you're going to need is a fork, a spatula for mixing. If you don't have one, you could also use a spoon, and then just a bowl to mix our cookies in. So for our ingredients, for our banana ice cream today, all we're going to need is some vanilla and some bananas. For our cookie, we're going to need some oatmeal. You can use quick oats or rolled oats. Today I have rolled oats. We're going to need some type of sweetener. So today I'm using agave syrup, but you could also use maple syrup, brown rice syrup, whatever you have at home is totally fine. And then you're also going to need some peanut butter. I have an all-natural peanut butter here. That's definitely what I recommend for this recipe, but you can use whatever you have at home. So for our ice cream, all we're going to need for our vanilla ice cream are bananas and vanilla. So to get started, I am just going to cut a couple of bananas into some slices. So just peel them. And same thing. So the size of your slices doesn't matter too much. If you have a weaker blender, I would recommend doing some smaller size pieces just because it'll help the blender blend it a little better. But if you have a really great blender, you could just cut them in half like that and put them in the freezer. Totally up to you. I'm just going to do some smaller pieces today. So the recipe calls for 2.5 cups of bananas. I actually have already frozen some ahead of time. So this is really just an example of what you're going to be doing. So all you're going to do, here, let me put this in front of me, is place your bananas on the baking sheet. This is probably the quickest way to freeze them because they're all separate and they'll freeze a lot faster. But if you don't have a baking sheet or you don't have space in your freezer, you can just put them in a bag or a container and pop them in the freezer and they'll freeze just as well. So you're going to want to freeze them for at least 4 hours. Overnight is probably best. And then we will get on with making our ice cream. So I'm going to go put these in the freezer and come back. We're actually going to need a oat flour. So what we're going to do is blend our oats in our food processor to make a flour. If you don't have oats, you can definitely just use all-purpose flour, whole wheat flour, rice flour, whatever you have at home is fine. But this is really great because oats are high in fiber and they're really good for us. So I'm going to grab our food processor and we need 3/4 of a cup. So it's half a cup and a quarter. And we're just going to pulse that until it's really fine and blended. So I'm going to put it on high and we'll just go for maybe 10 seconds and see what it looks like. Let's see. Okay, I'll go a little bit longer. Just check again. So that looks pretty good to me. You want it to be pretty fine because it's going to affect the texture of your cookie. But honestly, if you wanted to, you could just leave it as full oats and it wouldn't change how they bake or anything. It would just change the texture. So mine looks, I don't know if you can see, kind of like halfway there, but I kind of like some texture in my cookie, so that's how I'm going to leave it. If you want it really fine, just keep blending it for longer. So I'm going to add that into my bowl here. Put that to the side. And we'll just add our next ingredients. So the next thing we're going to need is a cup of peanut butter. And since this is natural peanut butter, I stirred it ahead of time. It was very chunky. So if you need to do that, go ahead and just stir up your peanut butter. But this is already pretty smooth, so I'm just going to dump it directly into my measuring cup. And hopefully it comes out. Doesn't have to be exact, like that's a little messy, but it's pretty good. So we're just gonna use our spatula and scoop that directly into our bowl. You could also use almond butter or any nut or seed butter that you like. If you have someone in your family or yourself who has a nut allergy, whatever you prefer is good, but it is gonna affect the flavor. So I'm choosing peanut butter because I really like peanut butter, but if you're choosing like a sunflower seed butter, for example, it is really going to taste like sunflower seeds, so make sure that's a flavor that you enjoy before you choose to do that. So the next thing we're going to need is our sweetener. So today I have agave syrup. Like I said earlier, you can use maple syrup, you could use coconut syrup, whatever you have at home is totally fine. You do want it to be a liquid sweetener though, because that's what kind of helps bind our recipe together. So we're going to use 5 tablespoons, and I'm going to measure it out with my tablespoon here just by scooping out of my bowl. So that's 1. Again, it's not going to be perfectly exact, but that's all good. 2. You could also use honey if you have honey at home. Again, the sweetener is going to affect the flavor a little bit. So if you're using maple syrup, it'll taste more mapley. If you're using honey, it might have a bit of a floral kind of flavor. This agave syrup is pretty neutral. And we have a lot of it right now here at Foodshare, so it's a good thing to be using up. All right. So that's all we need in our bowl for our cookie dough, and I'm just going to mix this together until it forms a dough consistency. All right, see how quick and easy that was? So now, all we need to do is form some balls and pop them in the oven. So before I get my hands dirty, I'm gonna put some parchment paper on our baking sheet. So parchment paper is really good because it's really easy to use. You can compost it after using it, and also, you just rip this first. It avoids you having to do a lot of dishes after baking, so that's always fun. If you don't have parchment paper, that's totally fine. You might want to put a little bit of oil on your baking sheet or something. Or you could use a silicone baking pad if you have one of those. They're reusable. They're also really great. I just don't have one with me today. So what I'm going to do is just use my hands and form some balls with our cookie dough. So you're just going to roll it between your hands. It is feeling a little bit wet, but that's okay. Just pop it on there. Whatever size you like is okay. Actually, maybe I'm going to make them a little bit bigger. Since we're doing ice cream sandwiches, I think a big cookie would be better. So I'm just going to keep repeating that until we use up all of our cookie dough. It's okay if you have to shift things around. That's just part of cooking or baking. It's totally normal. It's okay to get messy in the kitchen. That's just part of the fun, honestly. Okay, so this looks like it's gonna make 4 very large cookies for me. So I think I'm just gonna stick with that. And I'm just gonna rinse off my hands very quickly. Remove that. All right, so if you've ever had a peanut butter cookie, you probably know that they typically have fork marks in them. So I'm just gonna do that to make it look
traditional.
Traditional. Let's make it look a little fancy. If you wanted, you could double or triple the cookie dough amount, and then you could make a bunch of ice cream sandwiches or just a bunch of cookies. Since this is a pretty small recipe, I'm probably going to eat all of them myself, honestly. But you can make more if you have a big family or you have friends coming over. Probably not now because of COVID, honestly, but maybe for your family. All right, so now that we've done that, we are going to put them in the oven. So have the oven preheated at 350 degrees, and we're gonna put them in for 12 to 18 minutes. So it really depends on the size of your cookie. Since these are larger, it'll probably be 18 minutes. But if you have smaller cookies, then probably closer to 12 minutes. So I'll just go put those in the oven. All right, so our cookies are done. They're honestly a little bit overdone, but that's totally fine. They're still gonna taste good. So what I'm gonna do is just place them on a cooling rack for them to cool faster and to stop the cooking process. So place them on there. All right, so here are our frozen bananas. I have some that are little pieces, some in bigger pieces. Whatever you chose to do is totally fine. So the next step is just to pop them into our food processor. So I'm just gonna take the lid off, and they might be a little bit stuck to the pan. So make sure you're using clean hands when you're doing this. And I'm not even gonna measure them out. You don't really need to measure them. You just wanna have enough that your blender is gonna blend them and it's not all gonna be stuck at the bottom. So it's good to have enough in there. I'm just gonna use all of these actually. So for flavorings, today we're gonna be doing vanilla, but you could choose to do chocolate by adding a tablespoon of cocoa powder in there. You could make it a fun green color by adding some spinach or some kale or spirulina powder. I've also seen online that you can make salted caramel flavor by adding some dates and a pinch of salt in there. I haven't tried it, but that sounds really good to me, so I would definitely recommend exploring different flavors if you are able to and you have those ingredients at home. But we're gonna keep it simple today, do vanilla. So all I'm gonna add as well is some vanilla extract. We just need 1 teaspoon for this amount of bananas. If you're doing a way larger batch, definitely add more, or if you're doing a smaller batch, add less. So just 1 teaspoon right into the food processor. And that's it. Those are all the ingredients for our really simple, healthy ice cream. So this is the part where patience is key. You're gonna wanna blend it until it's very, very smooth. It's not as good if it's kind of chunky, and it just takes some time. It might take 1 minute, it might take 3 minutes, depends on your blender. If you have a less powerful blender, you might need to add some liquid here. So 1 to 2 tablespoons of milk or plant-based milk, Even water would be fine, just to help it get started blending. I've made this a few times at home before, so I know that this blender is going to be able to do it, but if you do need to add some liquid, go ahead and do that. Just make sure you're adding a little bit at a time because you won't be able to take it out once you've already put it in. So, all right, we're going to get started and blend it. So I'm going to go on high, and we'll see how long it takes, I guess. Okay, so if this happens, don't worry. What we're gonna do is grab a spatula and just push some of the bananas down, because right now it's all around the edges and it's not gonna blend very well. So I'm just gonna grab a spatula and just push everything back down into the blender. If this is happening way too much, like I said, you can add a little bit of liquid, but I think the texture of this ice cream is the best when no liquid is added. So if you can hold off and just be patient with it, it might just work out. Okay, so I'm gonna go again on high. So we're just gonna check on it again. Look at that. That is the texture that we are looking for. So it's really thick and creamy, and it's gonna hold up really well on our ice cream sandwiches. So at this point, you could choose to put it in a container and pop it in the freezer if you want a harder textured ice cream that you can really scoop and put on a cone. So what you would do is just put it in a container, put it in the freezer a couple hours, and then when you go to use it, you're gonna thaw it for 10 to 15 minutes and then go ahead and use it. But since this ice cream looks pretty good and I like a more soft serve texture, I think we're gonna go ahead and just use it right away. Give ourselves a nice little scoop of ice cream. And then we're gonna top it with our second cookie. Maybe be a little gentle with it because these cookies are pretty solid, but they might fall apart a little bit. It's like all in my teeth.
One of your better ones?
It's pretty good. Very peanut buttery, which I like. It is falling apart right now, so I would recommend cooling your cookies a little bit longer than I did. They look pretty solid, but they'll definitely stick together or stay together better if they're cooled more. You could even build your ice cream sandwich and then put it in the freezer to have like a really solid one. But this is okay. It's pretty good. I'm not mad at it, and it's very healthy and good for you, so definitely give it a try. Thank you for joining this cooking class today, and we hope you try out this recipe and join us at the next one.